Well, in this session, we're going to dive into a little more detail around 5 decisions that you need to make. What I didn't include was paying for it. We can add that to the list, call that number 6, and I'm happy to start anywhere you would like to start. Any burning questions that you want to start with? Thanks for your contribution to the last
You
section.
keep
There.
the same ones on different time. I guess it's kind of connected to the accounting stuff that we started.
Okay.
Seems like schools are always behind the curve with technology. So how do you keep up? If we're 5 to 10 years behind the private sector, what steps can we take? Or is it just a funding issue
Yeah. So I think that, the long-term answer, and again, I think Morrisville is probably, a decent example of this. That it took Mark probably 4 budget cycles to create this layer of $250 per kid, per teacher, per kid per year, and to align the rest of his funding to support that. So it took him a few budget cycles, but now he's got a sustainable model where there's a refresh built in. He's got a sort of a layer of supports in place that start with the informed user. So user plus online resources plus telephone resources that he gets with Apple, with his that come with the machines, and then help desk. And I think they, like I tried to do, they use kids to help out with tech support. So, in addition to building a sustainable layer in the budget that has a regular 3-year refresh, creating the resources to support it with tech support and professional development. I think professional development, as an example, is another category where we can do better for less. Where you can create, we were just talking about this, we were just talking about PD out in the lobby, where I think we can create, Summit Public Schools is a great CMO, small CMO in the Bay Area, and they have a teacher development system that I think is the best that I've seen. They have 7 dimensions of effective teaching, and they have 4 levels. So it's a competency-based system for teachers where they can move from novice to expert. And it takes about 2 years to learn and be able to demonstrate through a set of observations and a set of performance metrics that you're ready to move to the next level. So you can build that sort of competency-based system for teachers, and you can support it with a variety of resources, some of which are planned and get incorporated into an individual learning plan for teachers. You can do that on bloomboard.com. And then you can create a set of online just-in-time resources. So at 10 o'clock at night when a teacher thinks, oh, I got to do this kind of lesson, I have no idea how to run, I don't know how to use Blackboard Collaborate, and it's in my lesson plan for tomorrow, oh my God, what do we do? They should have just-in-time resources available. So I think building that sort of, putting teachers on teams, having a set of progression, a competency-based progression for teachers, combining both face-to-face and cohort instruction with these just-in-time digital resources. I think you can build a better and more supportive PD sometimes without spending more than a traditional system. Bloomboard.com is another Learn Capital company that we've invested in. It's a free teacher observation and evaluation system that has a marketplace of PD opportunities on the back end. So you don't pay for anything if you don't want it, but it does have a really good free observation and individual learning plan. Bloomboard.com. Yeah. So more on financing. We can cycle back to this at the end, but that's sort of the question, right?
So
Yeah.
for a startup for a school that's just starting fresh, obviously.
That's a
it
big
would be
advantage.
Smart to just invest in technology off the bat. What do you recommend?
Well, it would be smart, first of all, to pick a model that is a productive model for kids and teachers.
So, like a flex model?
Are you starting at high school or elementary?
Middle school.
No, okay. You'll probably want to do, are you going to grow up to high school?
Most likely, yes.
If I were you right now, I would probably do a rotation model that, at least in the upper division, had elements of flex. So for most kids, I would probably go 100% to a flex model for junior, senior. And I would probably create a lower division, upper division, and then sort of senior academy. And the senior academy would be flex, but the lower division, upper division would be like a 2 or 3 year grade span that would, have you been to Rocky Mount yet?
No.
So go visit them and you'll see something that looks like Carpe Diem, where kids are spending a portion of their day online and a portion of their day in a classroom setting. And that classroom setting can be a combination of small group instruction, tutoring, one-on-one tutoring, but it can also be enrichment, extension, application, integration opportunities that sort of build on top of. So it feels like the classroom setting ought to be a time to either catch up and connect kids to the work that they're trying to do online, and then for those that are making reasonably good progress is to sort of extend it to deeper learning, making community connections, those kinds of things. So that is the sort of blend. And you can keep your hands on the dials in terms of the percentage of the day that they spend in a learning lab or in a traditional classroom. Particularly if you use laptops instead of a tethered device, then it makes it a little easier to be flexible and be dynamic about what the scheduling looks like.
Do you think it's better to go with more laptops or tablets versus use tethered desktop?
So
Yeah.
this plunger phase is interesting, and we'll come back to that, because Rocky Mountain is an interesting example of shifting a K-12 system in a year. I don't know that I've seen one of those before. There are pros and cons. The other thing we talked about when we were walking through the hallway is the yin and yang of it all. Of if you are making a transition, it's really important to have the right balance of innovation and execution. This is really an execution business. By that I mean great teaching in every classroom every day, right? And so finding the right amount of innovation that your system can incorporate without losing the ability to know that you're going to have really good teaching happening every day for every kid. So when you're thinking about the phase or plunge, you have to think about keeping that balance right. So let me find, that's a classroom rotation model. So here's a couple thoughts on devices. So I know tablets are super tempting right now, and I have several. I have an Android and a Surface and a couple iPads, so I'm not anti-tablet, but, and this may be an old guy point of view, but I still view tablets as consumption devices. And my view, and this is I think particularly true for secondary kids, is I want them, like you and me, to have a 3-screen day. I want them to have a mobile learning device, particularly for consumption and communication. I want them to have a production device where they're able to write and produce and edit and think multimedia. I want secondary kids, I want high school kids writing 500 words a day across the curriculum, right? I want them publishing, not just turning stuff in. And so that's why these other slides talk about starting with with your learning goals. I mean, I think that's the most important thing, is for you and your team to get really clear, like, what kind of work do we want young people to produce? What do we want them actually to do? And when you think about the roles and goals for kids, goals for the school, we wrote this paper called How Digital Learning Contributes to Deeper Learning. It's on Getting Smart. It lists about 20 roles that particularly secondary students can play: historian, scientist, maker, coder, journalist, inventor. So think about those roles, and then think about what should that learning environment look like, and then you can ask this device question. So back to the three-screen day. The three-screen day, in my view, is kids ought to have a mobile device, they ought to have a production device, and there ought to be a sharing device. That's a smart board or a big monitor at school, something where a whole class or group of kids can meet around. And that, maybe not every day, but like over the course of 48 hours, the potential to learn on those three different screens, a consumption device and a production device and a sharing device, I think is a neat vision. You probably can't afford to pay for 3 screens for every kid, so you can start to think about what are we going to provide, and then you can layer a BYOD layer on top of that. I sort of think of this as a good production device, and that is a good consumption device. And if I was you, I would say, but this this works too. I do that when my battery runs out on that.
Yeah.
So I would start with a production device if I'm thinking about a secondary school, and then I would allow families to add a consumption device, a mobile learning device on top of that. And so sort of layering technology, some that you provide, some that schools provide. And so I think in that sort of way of a combination of BYOD and provision layer, an equity layer, that you can create a sustainable high access environment. I think tablets are pretty cool for elementary. So if I was starting at school, I'd probably go one-to-one with tablets, probably K5 or something, and then go with some kind of a production device above that.
How do you manage when you have your school-based technology with the laptops and stuff, maintenance and all of those things that go on, maintaining them and stuff?
So this is a place where the guys at Rocky Mountain have fixed devices, so that they have a lab setting. And there's advantages, some cost advantages, and some maintenance advantages, and some security advantages to having that kind of a setting, right? If you do go with laptops, then it's really important to have an acceptable use policy. So you have to meet with parents every year, and they have to sign an acceptable use policy. Like Mooresville and most schools that have take-home devices, you really should ask parents to pay $50 or $75 use fee. That'll at least cover the cost of insurance for the device. You may have to scholarship that for half of your parents, but for everybody that can, they should pay a user fee. So that can be part of, when you think about how do we get to $250 per kid per year to provide devices. If parents can provide 50, it's not, now is a good time to talk to your state about making a contribution to that device fund, because the state's going to be requiring you to administer online assessment. And in 2015, it's a good thing. This is a lobbying issue that your association should be talking to the folks at the Capitol about, helping out with broadband and making a contribution to device access. So, are there other questions about support?
Yeah, for like support, the larger systems, within the counties, they have, tech support groups and
Right.
maintain networks and solve issues and install printers and all that.
Or did you do for a small school?
Yep.
Thank you. Then you have to hire a guy like Greg.
It's accomplishing.
So we would recommend that you find a local technology provider to be your partner and help you figure that out. And depending on the number of devices, you probably gonna have to have somebody on staff that is a tech person.
I mentioned earlier that Mooresville and Maine, where every kid gets a laptop, like they buy a layer of tech support, you know, and they have reasonable responsiveness, so kids and teachers can call an 800 number and get pretty good support. So that is a strategy, but you know, you may be able to negotiate that sort of arrangement with a local tech vendor. And the state of Maine is opening up their RFP to other people to join, so I think even charter networks, other district states will be able to buy off of their contract. So there may be a way that you can piggyback on somebody else's procurement, so that's worth looking at. But tech support will be in, I mean, the good thing is these devices are getting easier to use. I did find, all the way back in the dark ages, like 20 years ago, pretty good success having kids help out in tech support and giving them real roles in my tech support department. So a lot of our high school kids would graduate with that on their resume of being part of our tech corps. And this is in the battle days when you had to like put a disk drive in to update every single machine every 6 months. You know, so now with cloud-based management, it's getting a lot easier to manage that stuff. Yes.
Do you have a source for getting data on quality rotation curriculum providers? How do you start that search? How would you start that search to have it as a complement to a traditional brick-and-mortar school?
Yeah, it's a bit of a free-for-all right now. There's a little bit of information on Ed Shelf. I think Ed Shelf is part of Ed Surge. But anyway, I think if you go to Ed Surge, which they put out a weekly blast, and they got a Gates grant to do some product reviews on their site, edsearch.com. And that's going to be on the learning management systems and content providers. The real Wild West is around the apps that run on mobile devices. There's probably 40 or 50,000 learning apps that run on mobile devices, so it's impossible to keep up with what's happening there. For little kids, Common Sense Media has really good app reviews on their site. Common Sense I think it's Common Sense. Yeah, Common Sense Media.
Looking more junior high, high school.
Okay. I don't think there's a good consumer reports kind of report on this. What subjects are of particular interest? Okay. So let's talk about middle grade. So we at Rocky Mountain, you guys use Dreambox, and you use that K5?
K6.
K6. So Dreambox is good. A new product that I recommend is iReady, i-ready.com from Curriculum Associates. They also have a print product that goes with it. They're both sort of freshly built for the Common Core. iReady is a K-12 adaptive assessment like NWA MAPS. But they have a line instruction that goes with it, K8. So both reading and math is, I think, a really good adaptive instruction system. Also in the adaptive math, in the middle grade category, Reasoning Mind is a nonprofit in Houston that's worth looking at. It's two Russian father and son. Just hired one of my old program officers from the Gates Foundation. So I think that's a really good product. In the not adaptive, but sort of smart and engaging, Carnegie Learning is still worth looking at. CarnegieLearning.com. It came out of Carnegie Mellon. Agile Mind. I'm 18 months out of date with them, but Agile Mind, the IP from Agile Mind comes out of the data center at UT, and that's pretty good. If you're thinking sort of 612, and you want to, now we're going to go from engaging in adaptive to more traditional courseware. And this is the sort of frustrating choice that you guys can verify. The frustrating place that we are right now is that you can choose from a more traditional learning management system that runs comprehensive courseware, and you can get a system that's easy to manage and monitor, is quite comprehensive, but not terribly flexible, won't allow you to add a lot of content. In general, closer to the one-way slog that I described. But I did say I saw Apex guys 2 days ago in Mesa. They do have some content now for iPads that's a bit more. It's not quite adaptive, but it's makes it easier for teachers and kids to find grade level collections. So when you think about comprehensive courseware in math, Apex is pretty good. We just at Advanced Math, we did a fairly comprehensive look at all the offerings, and Apex still comes up reasonably good, including for struggling learners. K-12 has, you guys have a number of brands in the space. They like KCDL and A+, so both advanced stuff and you know, down to credit recovery. They have a big library and a couple different brands that are worth looking at. On the science side, what do you guys use in science? Anything you want to mention?
What we're using in high school, all of our courseware is E2020, or Ingenuity as it's called now. We've looked at discovery learning, but we're not crazy about it.
Did you say it was called then? What did you say it was called then?
Ingenuity, that changed their name a couple months ago.
So, I mean, the nice thing about Ingenuity, it's like a school in a box, right? It's a comprehensive curriculum, runs on a learning management system. It's easy to manage and monitor. There'll be parts of it that you really appreciate, and parts where you wish there was more flexibility. You know, they're working on that. But I mentioned Edmodo earlier today. It's a company we started a couple years ago. It's sort of on the other end of the easy to manage and monitor and totally comprehensive. Edmodo is the Wild West. It's like Facebook for schools, right? You know all. So it's a very different choice, which can be great if you have a group of teachers that are skilled at developing or aggregating content. Let me mention just a couple OER providers, free stuff. In terms of secondary math, there is nrockmath.org, National Repository of Open Content. They also have hippocampus.org. That's a full high school math and science curriculum online with voice over text. So it's pretty good content, you know, and particularly for ELL kids that want to push the button and listen. They can hippocampus.org, or you can find it on nrocmath.org, nrockmath. CK12, I just wrote a blog about CK12 yesterday. CK12.org has a 612, grade 612 math and science collections. And it's, they have Flex Math, which is a program that came out of leadership public schools in Oakland. And they have these things called Flexbooks, which you can take content on the site, make your own, add your own content, and turn it into an ebook really easily. So they're a great resource. You'll notice the Amplify tablets that came out at South by 2 weeks ago are loaded with Khan Academy CK12, and they've added some of their own science content, but it includes CK, Khan Academy. There's always Curwiki, CURRIKI.org. They have 40,000 learning objects online. OERcommons.org is another big open repository. But there's particularly for secondary math and science, it wouldn't be a stretch to run your school with free content. I mean, it's that good. You sort of owe yourself and your team a little bit of time to take a look at it. What else should we talk about? Any more on tablets? Anybody a big fan of tablets?
See Chromebook up there?
You know, I listed Chromebook. That Chromebook is definitely worth looking at. You know, they're advertising that $249 Chromebook on TV now. I like those guys. I like the device. I have one at home that I sort of keep running next to that one and sort of use it as my internet device. And all of my businesses, all of my calendars, all of my emails are all Google Docs and Drive. And so particularly if you're going to go that route, Chromebooks are great. The thing about a Chromebook is it's a web appliance. There's no hard drive to it. So it's great if you're online. What I haven't figured out is working offline with it, right? Because I'm going to fly back tonight on a plane that I don't think has Wi-Fi. So I think Drive now lets you work offline.
It does.
Right? Yeah. So if you can do that on a Chromebook, it's awesome. Right? Because that was the only reason that I wasn't using it full time. But they're cheap. They're closer to indestructible. And the cool thing about a web appliance like that is that if a kid drops his, you can give another one, and they just log on, and bam, you just provision the desktop. It's all there. So
Their Gmail account, so they can share, if they're all on those Chromebooks or have Drive, they can share very easily their documents. They can, share with teachers, and it builds that social aspect as well. So easy to submit assignments.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really interesting and important new skill. I mean, I write all day, every day, and I do it with a team. And so I will write a piece, and then someone will add a piece to it. Like the piece that I'm writing about Raleigh for a week, I'm writing a piece about Milwaukee, and then a piece about Raleigh the following Monday. So I have people around the country that have access to that device that are dropping stuff in the notes right now, right? And so I can write a blog, and then I send it to my daughter, and she'll edit it, or my wife will add something. She'll add a note. So just the ability to write in community like that, I think is part of, it'll be how a lot of us work, right? And for kids to be able to write in that sort of highly social way, I think is really, at least part of the time, is really cool.
What's the advantage then of buying an Amplify tablet or the new ones coming out from Pearson is supposed to be better?
I don't know anything about that, and should. They're one of my blog sponsors, so I will. And I just interviewed their mobile dude and their mobile
heard it here first.
I will check it out. So the advantage of the Amplify tablet is it's, so it's like $300 plus $100 subscription, so it's $400 to get started. So the cool thing about what Amplify has done, the classroom management tools are pretty cool. Have you seen a demo of that? Has anybody seen a demo of Amplify? So the cool stuff is that y'all are on your Amplify tablet, and if I'm the teacher, I have a view of each of your desktops, right? So I can pull up a screen that will show me sort of see the chart and by name what app you're in, and then I can push a button that says Eyes on Teacher, and everybody's screen goes dark, and you know you have to pay attention. It's really easy to push assignments out, to collect assignments, so there's some nice communication tools. Easy collaboration between kids. So there's some of those features that are nice. I mean, you can use Edmodo and things like that to get to a similar place, but
Aren't there like management systems like that for safety and for classroom management, like land school and?
yeah. What do you guys use for network management?
Insight Manager by Brownies. They're the people that make deep freeze.
Hey, Greg is a big fan.
Is that Insight? Insight.
With an I?
INSIGHT.
But I guess just the last word on device choice, sort of start with the learning goals. What do we want kids to know and be able to do? What kind of work do we want kids to do? Then how's the school going to operate? What's the day look like? What's the interaction that we want between kids and teachers? And then make the device choice after you've thought about all of those things. When I look at all of those things, I'm not a big fan of iPads in secondary schools, but some folks are starting to make good use of them. There are truckloads of them showing up at schools these days. So they're sort of the new thing. I haven't seen good examples of schools really getting the most out of them.
Do you see Chromebooks as we have the capacity to have a dual role between consumption of device as well as the production of device pretty easily because of the size and portability?
Yeah, probably. But I can also see kids easily supplementing that with one of these.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a nice combination. Yeah.
With the field vision you have, the work that you do, I think you have a good handle on where the current state of all of this is, the technology, the curriculum, the learning systems and whatnot. What's your best guess as to what this is going to look like in 15 years?
I don't know what it's going to look like next year.
And the answer to the question is, do you think that the makers and politicians will actually let that happen? What would happen if they got out of the way?
Wow, it's hard to even know where to start. So I am pretty confident that the shift to digital is going to happen faster than most folks. I think that this online testing thing in 2015 is a pretty big deal, and that there'll be a significant increase in student access to technology, at least partially as a result of that. I think blended learning, interest in blended learning by school administrators has really grown rapidly. The biggest factor, the biggest change force that's happening right now is just teacher and student adoption of these devices. That a lot of our teachers and kids have already made the shift to digital learning, and they're just waiting for us to catch up. That's both good and bad, right? For you as a school administrator, the good news is there are probably a bunch of teacher leaders that you can and should harness. The bad news is there are more teachers than ever that are completely off the ranch, that are doing their own thing, right? And so I think it can be a bit more of a challenge to create a coherent school model today, right, where things hang together, where it's a more seamless experience. But the fact that so many parents, teachers, and kids have gone digital is sort of an undeniable force. That means that we're living on this sort of an exponential curve, not a linear curve. And that means that things are happening more quickly than we think with our rear view sort of mirror brains. On the policy front, so digitallearningnow.com is this 10-point policy framework that Jeff Bush and Bob Weiss and I put together in 2010, and that's sort of my best current suggestion around what state policy should look like. Yesterday, we released our state report cards, and so it scores every state on those 10 elements of high-quality digital learning. North Carolina didn't do very well. I think I think you got a C, probably a generous C, right? Let me just pick one element out of that platform that I think is really profound and mostly great, but something I worry about, and it's choice to the course. So Utah was one of the first states that grabbed that platform and ran with it, and they passed a choice to the course bill, which basically gives every kid and every family access to multiple providers down to the course level. So you think about this sort of unbundled experience that your kids are going to increasingly have, where they may be with you for a chunk of the day, but they may also be with North Carolina Virtual, and they may spend part of the day with K-12, and that kids are sort of increasingly from K to 20 going to have, as they get older, an experience that's probably more of a multi-provider transcript. And there may be some days where you're managing the transcript, and some days where you're providing, supplemental services to somebody else to a kid who somebody else is managing their transcript. So I think you'll see that sort of day where the experience is more bundled. So right now, I'm writing a paper on school finance. So we're suggesting that funding ought to be weighted and flexible and portable and performance-based. So weighted means kids that have lots of risk factors ought to get more money. Portable means students and families ought to be able to take that to an authorized provider. Flexible means when it gets to your shop, you ought to be able to do what you want with it, right? That it shouldn't come with all the programmatic input-driven strings and reporting requirements. And fourth, by performance-based or performance-promoting, a portion of the money ought to be contingent on completing the course at a satisfactory level, so that there's at least not incentives for kicking kids out of school, that there's incentives for performance and completion. So that's what I think the funding system ought to look like to surround this sort of unbounded, untethered experience. Here's what I worry about. And this is the final paper that we're writing about online learning. What I can't figure out is where and exactly how transcript management and guidance and course selection support happens. And the problem is it's hard to know where to locate that, right? If you give it to school districts, you'll never see the kids again, right? So there'll be a barrier to options. If school districts sort of own the transcript and if school districts can provide advice on where kids can go to school, they would never leave, right? On the other hand, we are learning that some kids do better in online learning than others. One thing that we learned, we had a meeting with K-12 and Connections, and the lady from Connections showed this data that there's this straight line that sort of makes sense, that if kids are returning, they do really well. If they enroll early, they do pretty well. If they enroll late, they struggle. If they enroll really late, they usually drop out. right? And so just this when do kids enroll thing is really a big deal. And then you add sort of prior performance. If you have kids that are coming to you 2 years or 3 years behind and they enroll in late, guess what? They're not going to do very well in an online setting, right? But right now it's not really possible for a kid or for an online school to require the parents to come in and do a face-to-face meeting before they sign up. So somehow we have to better inform the choices that families make, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't block their options. And I don't know, I've been thinking about this for a couple of years, and I haven't quite figured out how to advise policy on that front. But that's a partial picture. All right, we have a couple minutes.
I think about 7 minutes.
All right.
It sounds like when you're, maybe I'm not envisioning this properly, but when you're talking about, some classroom time, some
Yeah.
varied online time in different places and everything, it sounds like an accountability nightmare.
Well, I think,
I mean,
Well,
who's
let-
responsible? I think the teacher is ultimately responsible for the kids getting here.
just let me confuse it further by saying, online time plus classroom time plus community time, right? So I would love to see, particularly at the high school level, more work-based and community-based learning, plus time in school, plus time online. And multiple providers, so in a traditional sense, yes, accountability nightmare. But I guess another part of what we need to develop really quickly is really good growth measures. And not just aggregate growth measures for schools, but growth measures for kids, like down to the unit level. So what we should be able to do with these super grade books is look at the level and rate of progress. And even though if your kid is in Green Box and your kid is in Reasoning Mind and your kid is in Apex, we should have good enough comparability to say, your kid made 0.9 years worth of growth last year, and yours made 1.2, and yours made 1.4, and have good enough comparability around the Common Core that we can make judgments about effectiveness of providers. So I think it ultimately comes down to the provider that's authorized by the state, whether it's a district or a charter, and a growth measure of how kids are doing, at least down to the course level. And I'm hoping down to that we can soon get down to the experience level or the unit level, and at least approximate the sort of unit of growth that a kid is making as a result of that. But I think when we can measure that, we'll be better off. And what I think this means for teachers, earlier I said teaching in teams. It's going to, I think, very seldom be the case where you can say there is one teacher who has total responsibility for and for whom results are completely attributable, right? That's not going to be the case. Blended learning is a team sport. There will be this differentiated and distributed staffing model, meaning teachers at different levels and sometimes at different locations that contribute to the growth of a group of students. So with that sort of model, a lot of states have spent a lot of time trying to get down to this, one teacher in a classroom, and I think blended models like yours just are sort of blowing that up. And our friends at Public Impact down the road would say, well, there's still a teacher of record, so the senior teacher that runs that team ought to be the one, who takes responsibility for results. I like that, but I also think from an evaluation standpoint, what it says to me is that we will have to continue to apply professional judgment using a variety of data sources to acknowledge the contribution made by different professionals to a team. So it's just not going to be as simple as your 25 math students and what growth did they have just as a result of your work. It's not going to be that simple. So the takeaway from all of that, we need really good growth measures. That is super, super important.
In Rocky Mount, How is what you're doing squaring with the new educator evaluation, the North Carolina educator evaluation system? I mean, in terms of holding individual teachers accountable, kind of based on what they were just talking about. Is there a connection there that you're having to deal with, or teachers fussing about the standard 6 or whatever it is that?
Well, I think particularly at the high school level, there is a concern because more of the delivery of the classroom kind of modeling part of the instruction is on the computer, and the teacher doesn't control it, they have to teach off of that. And we do have to follow the state system. We're in the process of trying to work within that framework to develop a more coherent system that works for us, the way we do things. And we do feel like growth is going to be a significant part of that. So how we measure that is value added is something we want to particularly look at as a big part of that.
So closing thought, this chart is from the Blended Learning Implementation Guide. We published this last month. You can find it. It's the Blended Learning Implementation Guide. You can find it on digitallearningnow.com or on gettingsmart.com. It should go into more detail in all the stuff that we talked about. One thing I would really appreciate from you is we're going to put out a second version of that in June when all of these, probably July, but all 8 of these papers will get published as an ebook with version 2.0 of the Blended Learning Implementation Guide. So if you read that and you have questions or comments or additions, send them to me, and that would be super helpful in publishing the second version. So any unanswered questions or suggestions would really be appreciated. You can find me at tom@gettingsmart.com. And thanks for coming.